Let's take a look at the latest satellite view for this afternoon. You can actually see there's two areas of interest. The first one down here into the Western Caribbean, we've got a flare-up activity, and you can see the colder cloud tops associated with that. That is actually a sign of this continuing to strengthen down there in that region. We also have another area of low pressure into the Gulf of Mexico. That's actually dumping some very heavy rain across the Florida Panhandle. This low pressure will be traversing across Florida and then out into off the southeast coast, and eventually will be hugging the east coast, dumping some very heavy rain, especially along those coastal areas. But let's take a look at this disturbed weather down here in the Caribbean, because the latest update from the National Hurricane Center does in fact have a 70% probability now of this becoming our next named storm. So here's the latest update. We've got a significant area of low pressure that is developing and could become a tropical depression or a weak tropical storm by the time we head into that Friday time frame. So these areas of interest do include Cuba, Jamaica, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic, as we could be looking at some very, if not almost extreme rainfall across that region over the next couple of days, especially heading into that Thursday, Friday, Saturday time frame. So if you are new to the channel, welcome to my PAL Ultra channel. I'm going to be doing more updates on this channel. So if you hadn't subscribed already, definitely hit the subscribe button so you can follow all my content that I'll be uploading going forward. So let's kind of zoom in and take you back at where this hurricane center has kind of left us, right? We're almost at the end. We've got actually a couple more weeks of officially hurricane season. And this is actually pretty interesting. Here's the over total cone from the National Hurricane Center, the total time that these areas have spent within the National Hurricane Cone. And yeah, north of all these islands here, that's the maximum amount of time. But what's interesting is you can notice there's three areas across the United States, one down in Texas, one across Florida, and other one up towards Maine. Look at that, folks. The state of Maine had more time in the National Hurricane Center cone than really any other state across the United States. Who actually had that on their bingo card before the season even started? It's been a crazy season, and it's not over yet. So let's take a look at where we stand so far. In fact, we've had 20. Yes, we've had 20 named storms, folks. It doesn't seem like it, right? But in fact, it's the fourth busiest storm season on record, and we've only had like 3 actually made landfall. Remember Harold? This was Harold. That was a weak tropical storm that ran across deep South Texas, and then Idalia was the strongest storm of the season to impact the United States. That went across Florida. And then we also had Ophelia that ended up hitting portions of North Carolina. Now, up here in the state of Maine, these storms got close, but they ended up hitting Nova Scotia. But most of the storms actually remained out into the open waters, which is actually a good thing. But now we're tracking one more storm, folks. I think there's one more storm, and it will probably take the name Vince coming up. So how rare are November storms, and if not almost hurricanes, in the month of November? Well, in fact, if you take a look at the records and where they typically form, is where that activity is right now, just south of Jamaica and south of the Cayman Islands. This is typically a favorite area for this time of year if there was a storm to come to fruition. And if it did, it typically travels northeastward and comes across Cuba and out into portions of the Bahamas near the Turks and Caicos and the Dominican Republic. I think this is actually going to be following that similar path as well. Now, let's take a look at the dynamics it's got to work with. So even though it's the month of November, folks, down there in the Caribbean, it is 93 degrees right now into Jamaica. So, right, and the waters are cranking at 85 degrees right now. So this is why this is a favored hot spot for this time of year, because these waters are just extremely warm. And that's why we're even talking about possibly a tropical entity down there in that region. And also, we've got not only warm waters at the surface, but we got warm waters way below. We're talking about a half a mile, folks. So this is some of the warmest temperatures in the Atlantic basin, right there exactly where that disturbed weather is. So there's definitely signs coming together, a lot of the elements, and especially the vertical velocity index. This is pretty bullish. This is, in fact, real bullish. The deeper, darker green and blues you get, that is more upward rising motion air. That means the air is saturated. So it doesn't take much. All columns are saturated, so it doesn't take much to have that lift and produce some extreme rainfall rates, and that could be on the table as we go into that Thursday, Friday, into that Saturday time frame. And look at the bullseye again. It's south of Jamaica now, but it looks to cross over the island of Jamaica and then head in towards the Dominican Republic and cross over the Bahamas. So this area definitely needs to be on high alert for a definitely heavy rainmaker coming your way. And some of the ensemble members definitely keep it a tropical storm, but some of them actually turned it into a hurricane once it gets out into the Atlantic in this most favored area where they spent most of the time in the National Hurricane Cone. So yeah, there's a definitely possibility. Not only could this be named a storm, but it also could be named the last hurricane of the season once it gets out here in towards the Atlantic. So, but there's also not much shear associated with it as well. So it's got all the elements, folks. It's got very warm waters, it's got deep ocean content, it's got high vertical velocity lift, and it's got little no shear. So that's why the elements are definitely coming together and say, hey, we need to be on high alert that this is definitely looks to be a tropical storm. And then once it crosses over, there's not much shear associated with it up here as well. So then it likely could be coming our next hurricane of the season, and in fact our last one of the season. But from now until then, let's break this thing down. So this is what it looks like on some of the latest global guidance heading into that Thursday, Friday time frame. There's an area of low pressure, 1,005 millibars. This is the National Hurricane Center likely has it a tropical depression by then. If not a weak tropical storm, it will take the name Vince and be dumping some heavier rains in towards the Cayman Islands, definitely into the island of Jamaica, that Haiti region, into Cuba, and then towards the Dominican Republic, and eventually head towards the Bahamas. So if you look at some of this precipitable water index associated with it, look at all that deep water they're tapping into, that ocean water content with very heavy, almost extreme rainfall rates. Some of these maxing out over 3 inches per hour. So definitely, I think the heavier rain starts in Jamaica into the Cayman Islands during the day on Thursday. Then it continues all night long into the day on Friday, continuing to dump heavy rain. So mudslides, mudslides and landslides are definitely a huge worry across this region, especially if you live on the east side of Jamaica. Places like into the Kingston region could pick up double-digit rainfall over a 2-day time span. So that's definitely a huge concern. And looking at the latest, some of the global guidances is already hinting at that potentially double-digit rainfall across this region. This would likely be on Thursday and Friday, finally moving north of the island, likely by Saturday, but then impacting portions of the Dominican Republic, as this will just extend into portions of the Bahamas and eventually head out into the Atlantic. And the icon is kind of the same way. So most of the ensembles, most of the global models, most of the guidance going forward has potentially some double-digit rainfalls with extreme rainfall rates across that region. So if you're watching me from Jamaica, definitely be on high alert with this system. Just buckle down, because it's going to be a bumpy ride for those next 2 days into that Thursday, Friday, and then things will start to calm down once it gets north of you. But definitely be on high alert, and it's one of these things that you might just need to stay home and write this thing out before things, put yourself out of harm's way. So, but once it crosses over, so once this crosses over, this is kind of a favored area. So we're definitely looking at as it continues to possibly strengthen. This, yes, down to a 989. That would in fact make it a weak hurricane heading into that Sunday time frame. So it looks to be right now, it becomes a tropical depression by Friday, becomes possibly a named storm by Saturday, and then likely increasing to a possible weak hurricane into the day on Sunday. And this will continue to lift northward. No, it's not hitting Maine. It's not going to hit Maine, folks. Maine is safe from this one. But you're going to be close enough. You're going to get some larger swells and definitely some higher winds, especially along those coastal regions. But for this one, at least, Maine is in the clear, but definitely not in the clear if you live down there in the Caribbean, down there and towards Haiti and the Dominican Republic and those regions. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video. Definitely hit the subscribe button and catch me next update where I protect you before and after the storm.